Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Okay, this is the last video for this Halloween lineup. My first one on this channel. Let's give myself a big round of applause for having fun. How have y'all liked this lineup of Halloween stuff? I have been enjoying this immensely. Oh my god, my hair's not out. Okay, now we're good. Now we can get into the story. Ouija boards. There's many legends about how this board can be a tool to talk to ancestors, spirits, even famous spirits. But the Ouija board is most famous for being used to conjure demons. From really messed up slumber parties, to ghost hunting, to seances, to movies, the Ouija board is a staple in anything ghost and demons. There are many famous stories where a Ouija board takes center stage, but I would argue that the most famous use of the Ouija board is how a woman supposedly used it to build the weirdest house in the history of houses. Sarah Winchester. Let's get started. You gotta stretch. Y'all gotta stretch for this one, because this one's a doozy. This one is, I knew that Sarah Winchester was gonna be a complicated one. And of course, me falling into my rabbit holes, which I surprisingly did not fall into many rabbit holes. This story's just long. So get your coffee or tea or witch's brew and strap in. This is a long one. Let's get going. Sarah Sally Lockwood Pardee was born in the summer of 1839 at 28 Orange Street in New Haven, Connecticut. She was the fourth daughter and fifth child of father Leonard Pardee and mother Sarah Burns, which I actually have a friend named Sarah Burns, and that's just a little bit crazy. Though she's known as Sarah, she was called Sally her whole life and signed all of her documents as Sally. So I will be calling her Sally from this point on. Leonard managed the city bathing house, but found success as a Finnish carpenter and became the main provider for the family with his mill and wood shop called Leonard Pardee and Company. He would also hold court in the family home with some of the most prominent abolitionists and freethinkers of the time. Sarah was the youngest of four sisters and one brother. One sister, Sarah E. Pardee, who was the first child of their parents, died at just a year old from cholera. Growing up, Sally received a great education. She became proficient in French, Latin, Spanish, and Italian, and was skilled in music composition, math, and science. With her father regularly having progressive thinkers in the home, Sally was exposed to progressive ideas as well as her family was just progressive thinkers. Her family had forward-thinking ideas regarding religion and philanthropic choices such as abolition, suffrage, and animal rights. Though her family was very outspoken about their opinions, and Sally was too, she just wasn't as social as her siblings were. When Sally came into adulthood, she was a tiny 4'10" and just 95 pounds beauty. So much so that she got the nickname the Belle of New Haven. It's also said that she read a whole lot of books, so Belle of New Haven just kind of fits in. When Sally was 23, she married the son of a wealthy shirt manufacturer, neighbor, and childhood friend, William Winchester, on September 30th, 1862. They married during the American Civil War, and due to the war, there was a shortage of building material. So due to this, the newlyweds lived with William's parents on Court Street in New Haven. Sally's father-in-law, William's father, Oliver Fisher Winchester, was co-owner of the Winchester Davis shirt manufactory, and William was being groomed, essentially, to take on the company. Aside from shirt making, Oliver also had an interest in the firearms business. In the mid-1850s, a failing division of the Smith & Wesson Firearms Company was going into bankruptcy. Seeing an opportunity, Oliver assembled a venture capital with other stockholders and bought the failing division, better known as the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company, in 1855. By 1857, Oliver became the main stockholder in the company, relocated it to New Haven, and renamed it to New Haven's Arms Company. He soon sold the remaining interest in the shirt company and became secretary of the now Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The now family business became hugely successful from the manufacturing of the Henry rifle in 1860 that was used in massive quantities by some Union Army units during the American Civil War. From the Henry rifle came the most famous rifle in history, the Winchester rifle. Specifically, the Winchester Model 1873, which would become known as the gun that won the West. This model alone sold more than 7,000 rifles from the year it was manufactured in 1866 to 1916. This model was so famous that Wild West celebrities like Buffalo Bill Cody and Annie Oakley owned Winchesters, as did President Theodore Roosevelt. Which, quick side note here, Annie Oakley is coming to this channel soon. I don't know when, but she is coming, and I am so the heck pumped. I love Annie Oakley. When the Civil War ended on May 26, 1865, which I don't know why I didn't connect the dots faster. May 26 is when I was born, in 1998. So the Civil War ended 133 years before I was born. Just something that kind of blew my brains. The building material supply lines started back up, and by 1866, Sally and William was finally able to start building their new home on Prospect Hill. In that same year, on June 15th, Sally had their first and only child, a baby girl named Annie Party Winchester, in honor of William's sister who died during childbirth. Unfortunately, Sally suffered from marasmus, which basically means her body was unable to process calories, and Annie died at just about 6 weeks due to malnourishment. Basically, their child starved to death, and that's just really hard. That's hard. As with any death of a child, the couple was devastated and they withdrew from society, and Sally stayed secluded to her home and in her room for almost a year. During the construction of their home, the couple became fascinated with learning about architecture and design. This had been a hobby for Sally her whole life, and she learned about real estate financial strategies and investments from her husband and Oliver. Their home was completed in 1868, was about 20,000 square feet, had over 20 rooms with marble floors, large windows, plasterwork ceilings, decorative fireplaces, and chandeliers, and to top it all off, a circular drive in the front. That's foreshadowing if I've ever seen it. Unfortunately, the tragedies just kept coming for Sally. Her father died in June of 1869 at the age of 60, possibly from rheumatoid arthritis. Then from 1880 to 1881, 3 close family members of Sally's died. Her mother died in May of 1880. Oliver died in December that same year. Then in March of 1881, William died at just 43 years old from freaking tuberculosis. Just dead. Everybody's dead. When her husband died, Sally was only 40 years old, and he had made his wife executrix, which is a female executor of a will, and she inherited about 50% stake in her husband's company at the value of $20 million, which is about $603.5 million in today's money. Though she never took a position in the company, her stake gave her a continuous income of $1,000 a day, or just over $30,000 a day in today's money. Please give me $30,000 a day. With all this tragedy, Sally was like, I need a little break. So, with a little extra cash on her, she went on a 3-year tour of Europe before settling in California. She moved to California because her doctor recommended it for the drier and warmer climate to help with her worsening rheumatoid arthritis, because at the time, California was touted as a place with good soil, climate, and cheap land for sale. California also had many of Sally's family members there, and she paid for more family members to move to California and supported many of her relatives for the rest of their lives. San Francisco agent for the Winchester Company, Edward Ned Rambo, showed Sally properties in the Santa Clara Valley, and it is here that Sally bought for $12,570, which is over $411 today. I can't with this money that goes places. A 45-acre ranch with an 8-room cottage in San Jose, California. And yes, this is Sally's side saddle on a horse, and yes, we love that. Sally named her home and property Lanada Villa because it reminded her of the Lanada La Vista. Lanada Vista. There we go. Because it reminded her of the you know what? I'm just going to have the robot say that one. It's a tongue twister from my mouth.
Llanada Alavesa.
In Spain, on this land, Sally would be one of the first people in the area to grow fruit. She hired Ned to be the foreman of the farm and continued his job with the Winchester Company in San Francisco. She gave housing to the driver of her carriages, Frank Carroll's family on the property, and hired locals to staff her house and farm, many of whom were from Europe, China, and later Japan. Now, this house would be the start of the weirdest renovation in history. We all like to think that she started to build onto this house because ghosts came to her and told her what to build. But what actually started this weird renovation was a simple plan that Sally wanted to build a house. I don't know if it was an addition or it was going to be a separate house for her whole family. That was it. Just for her whole family. Don't know how many family members are alive at this point, but the point is it was for her whole family. That was the whole point. But this never happened, partly because the isolation of the property and because the construction never freaking stopped. She hired about 20 carpenters who would work in 24-hour shifts, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for the next 38 years. But funny enough, one family member did live with Sally, her niece Maria Daisy Merriman, in 1890. And reportedly, Daisy lived in the attic. Within just 6 months, the farmhouse went from 8 rooms to 26 rooms. Technically, Sally hired 2 architects, but she didn't really use them, so she was the main architect. Along with her travels around Europe and her love for architecture, Sally knew how to design a home. Kinda. It was typical at the time that homes had an assortment of unique decorations. The home has a statue of Hebe, which is the Greek goddess of youth, has intricately laid patterned wood floors of all types, including mahogany and teak, which is a tall tropical timber tree in Asia. The ceilings are stenciled and molded. There were German chandeliers, Asian furniture, French paintings, Austrian art glass, walls that looked like metal or leather. The gardens have plants from over 110 countries. The windows are all pastel colored. The upper level windows are a spider web design, which was very popular at the time. She installed what the heck? She even installed an annunciator, which is an early version of the intercom, to call the servants. Talk about extensive designing. I'm just saying. Sally did all the architectural drawings and designs herself, but there wasn't really a plan. clearly. She worked room by room, and if she didn't like the results, the section would either be torn down and rebuilt or would just abandon it for a time till she came back to it. Look, we all need to go, all right, look, this just isn't working out well. I need to take a step back. I gotta go take a walk and I will come back to it. She would scribble design plans on random pieces of paper and napkins for the workers to build rooms, towers, cupolas, or complete new additions that made no sense and no purpose, only to be plastered over the next day. By 1896, Sally started to go up, like really up. The 2-story home had, in some areas, gone up to 5 stories. She randomly built a 7-story tower that was rebuilt 16 times before Sally was satisfied. She's obviously picky, and that's fine. But 16 times for a tower? A 7-story tower? The Pizzolines, and they were fine with it. There are rooms in rooms, a staircase, one of 40, that leads to nowhere. A door opens to a wall. There's a skylight built into the floor. Another skylight is covered by another floor. There are other skylights that cover skylights. She just really likes skylights. There are tiny doors that open to big rooms and big doors that open to tiny rooms. There's a 2nd-story door that leads outside to nothing. I mean, if you're not careful enough, you literally just go out of the house and just fall 2 stories down. There's just a door there. Like, look at this thing. It's just a door. Upside down pillars are all over the house. There are 47 chimneys, and some have a ceiling on top of it. Balconies are on the inside. A linen closet is as big as an apartment. Doors can be opened from the inside of a room, but not the outside. Random! Windows on both sides of a particular brick chimney have Shakespearean quotes from Richard II and Troilus and Cressida. This chick even built another garden, this time indoors, but wait, it has state-of-the-art irrigation. She basically figured out a way to have, when the sprinklers come on the inside of the greenhouse, would pool onto the floor, would be piped through to the outdoor flower boxes. And this is in the 1890s. The house was originally blue, but Sally changed it to yellow. The house is a Victorian style, but she added East Lake and sticked design elements, and over time, the acreage went from 45 to 160. Sally, as we can tell by now, was way ahead of her time. She is thought to be the first builder to use wool insulation, which is flame resistant, improves indoor air quality, helps humidity control, and sound insulation. The house was lit with carbide gas that had its own manufacturing plant on the property. The house has light switches, which was apparently new at the time. Sally was one of the first builders to use elevators. 2 that were driven by hydraulics, and the 3rd by electricity, and she was the first to use a shower. Oh, the house also had a plumber and carpenter workshops on the property, along with electrical and water supply, and a sewage drainage system. Wow is all I can say. This manic construction slowed after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The quake happened on Wednesday, April 18th, 1906. That was a 7.9 on the Richter scale, killed more than 3,000 people. Multiple fires broke out and lasted for several days, and over 80% of the city was decimated. It is known as the deadliest earthquake in United States history. Until the San Andreas fault decides to snap, and bye-bye LA. It is thought that Sally was not at her home when the earthquake hit, but at her other home in Atherton, about 40 miles south of San Francisco. The house had tremendous damage. Most of the chimneys collapsed, the plaster, wood, and tile work was destroyed. The 7-foot tower was damaged, and third and fourth editions of the home collapsed and reduced the house to 4 stories. Once the debris was cleared and the home was made safe-ish, pipes were still poking out of the ground and some of the home was still in disrepair, Sally stopped building. But Sally did add one more thing to the home in 1916. The 3rd elevator. Just to top it all off. Because she stopped building, local newspapers declared her a mad woman, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. We still have a lot more to cover. I mentioned before that Sally was staying at another home in Atherton. That's not the only home Sally owned. She invested in and bought many homes in the area. She bought a home for her sister, Isabel Bell Merriman's family, for $10,000, which is about $366,000 today. The home, of course, had extensive additions and renovations that was overseen by Sally and her sister. As of 2018, this home is valued close to $7 million. Sally also purchased 140 acres of land next to this home and planned to raise and market large carriage horses. But the purchase of the land was difficult for reasons unknown, but hired Samuel Franklin Frank Lieb to complete the purchase. Unfortunately, the horse business venture was not successful. In 1903, Sally bought many homes in Atherton, one for her niece Daisy to live in. In 1904, Sally bought land in the San Francisco Bay Area and commissioned the construction of an ark or houseboat, depending on who you talk to. This boat was to be docked at her Burlingame property. This boat, or ark, barely had a scratch on it after the earthquake, and Sally and Daisy's family stayed in the boat while repairs were being done to their homes. Sally had many rental properties in Palo Alto because she thought that properties near Stanford would increase. I'm telling you, this lady's freaking smart. In 1907, Sally purchased a home in Atherton that would become her full-time home. She did not do renovations that we know of with this home, and apparently it was so good looking that it was featured in the program for the Panama Pacific International Exposition of 1915. 2 presidents have tried to visit the Winchester home. William McKinley in 1901 and Theodore Roosevelt in 1903. McKinley visited the Santa Clara Valley, but Sally didn't invite him to see her, despite him knowing her husband, and Roosevelt went to California. Now, rumors say that Roosevelt did try to visit Sally, but her gate was locked. But it is said that he didn't want to visit her no matter what because he didn't want to be seen as promoting Winchester rifles despite owning one. She stayed away from politics, but was engrossed in philanthropy. Most donations Sally made were anonymous. She supported many social causes, including being a paying member of a local chapter of the Red Cross and being on the financial committee that supported celebrating California's 15th birthday in 1900. After the earthquake, Sally donated $150 to the San Jose Relief Fund, which is just over $5,000 today, and she supported the Save the Redwoods campaign, which is an organization that protects and restores the redwood trees in California, by donating $500, which is $17,000 today. Her largest donations was to a tuberculosis ward in New Haven. At first, she donated $300,000 anonymously, or $10.2 million today. And over a 10-year period, Sally donated over $1 million, or between $24 and $34 million today, to this hospital, which opened on April 4th, 1918 as the William Winchester Hospital and became part of the Yale School of Medicine in 1848. Unfortunately, Sally wasn't well enough to attend the dedication ceremony. By 1906, 1903, Sally's rheumatoid arthritis had disfigured her hands and feet, which limited her ability to walk and write. She was even losing her teeth and had to start wearing dentures. She needed the help of a stenographer and her niece because due to her disfigured hands, it made it painful to write. Her health improved a little in 1911, so much so that she was able to sew. She hired Henrietta Severa to be Sally's nurse and secretary. By 1920, Sally barely left her home, but she still shopped for new clothes and material by having them either mailed to her or store employees would bring the newly bought items to her waiting in her car. By September of 1922, Sally was taken from her Atherton home to the Winchester home to be closer to her doctor who lived in San Jose. Sarah Sally Lockwood Winchester died on September 5th, 1922 at the age of 82 or 83 in her sleep of congestive heart failure. She is buried next to her husband and daughter in Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven. When Sally died, the construction stopped. Like nails that were being hammered in just were left midway into the wall. I'm sure they went, thank God I'm done. The estate was estimated to be worth $3 to $4 million, which was considerably less than what the rumors estimated. Sally named 5 employees in her will along with living family members. Most of the properties were sold off, and any remaining money left in the will for family members was to go to William Winchester Hospital once they died. And that if anyone disrespected her wishes, they got nothing. Even though most of her possessions were sold, the house was in such poor condition that it was deemed worthless and that only the property, the land, had value. 6 months after Sally's death in 1923, the home was purchased by a couple, John and Mamie, I don't know. I looked it up. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Brown. But they were unable to buy it all in one go. So a lease agreement was reached and they moved their family into the home. Can you imagine trying to figure out the room situation for your kids? Their plan, and this is nuts, was to create a park featuring back-to-back railway, which would be one of the earliest wooden roller coasters and was designed and built by John at an amusement park in Canada. So my guess is the roller coaster was going to be disassembled in Canada, then brought to California, put on the Winchester property, then built back up. I don't know how that works. But due to local restrictions, that idea was scratched. Plus, the home had insane public interest. So they pivoted and it opened as a tourist attraction. That same year, the home was opened to public tours and Meme was the first tour guide of the house. The gardens became Winchester Park and families could go and have picnics. In 1924, Harry freaking Houdini visited the home on Halloween freaking night, wanting to debunk the many paranormal stories that were coming from the house. He left with more questions than answers, and he referred the house as the Mystery House. And by 1931, John fully purchased the property, and it officially became known as the Winchester Mystery House. Okay, now for the fun stuff. Is the house haunted? Did Sally do seances? Was she crazy enough to use a Ouija board? Is the house built by ghosts? Was Sally just the most indecisive nutcase in the history of renovation and would try every Pinterest board of DIYs ever? Depends. Let me explain. Now, stories have Sally in her seance room every night with her Ouija board and her black veiled dress to consult with the spirits about the ever-expanding home, telling her to build this next, stop that project, I changed my mind, let's do this instead. All right, look. Let's go back to 1881 after the death of her husband. Unbelievably distraught about his death, Sally sought the advice of famous Boston medium Adam Coons. During a seance, That took a couple hours. Sally confided in him her guilt about the people killed by the Winchester rifle. He then told her that because of the people that were killed by the rifle, her new fortune was cursed. It was blood money. Adam further told her that these angry spirits demanded that she move to California and build them a house for their lost souls. When she arrived in California, Sally began holding her own seances every night at midnight so she could get the next day's building instructions from the spirit. She used a Ouija board, planchette, and shifted through 13 various colored robes that she would wear every night in her seance room. She was regularly visited by mediums and spiritualists to help her know how to satisfy these spirits and to help better her practices. Sally thought that to satisfy the angry spirits, she made sure that the construction never stopped because she thought that if it did, she would die. But Sally's a smart girl. She wasn't going to let these spirits completely bully her, so she took precautions. This is how the elaborate and odd features of the house came to be. This was a grand effort to confuse the angry spirits. The staircase that leads to nowhere, doors that open to sheer drops, hallways that go around in circles, rooms within rooms. My thought process is maybe she thought that building the home kind of in this weird way that the ghost would get lost. I don't know if that's true, but I love this theory. She would also ring her alarm bell every night at midnight to tell the spirits it was seance time, then at 2 a.m. to tell the spirits it was time to leave. Furthermore, Sally put the numbers 7, 11, and 13 into the architecture of the house. Now, 7 and 11 are lucky numbers, right? But 13 is a famously unlucky number, and she used the number 13 to keep spirits away. She even slept in different rooms just as an extra measure to keep the spirits away from her. That's the folklore. But here's what's probably the truth. Like I said in the Fox Sisters video, seances and spiritualism is nothing new. And during and after the Civil War, widowed wives and mourning mothers flocked to seances and spiritualism as a way to reconnect with their dead loved ones. And of course, there were many that just wanted to exploit the rich, grieving widows and mothers. So it could be that in the despair of losing her husband, Sally was duped. It also didn't help that Sally was also a recluse, barely left her home, and didn't openly talk about her personal life. Even though she was rich, she didn't mingle with the elites. We know that Sally had a massive love for architecture and design. She hired more like several architects, but they were quickly fired because they didn't meet on the same level of ambition that Sally was on about her renovation ideas. So she decided to do it herself with no personal training. And so with her having no personal training, mistakes were made. Sally wrote to her sister-in-law, Jenny Bennett, in 1898, saying in part, quote, "I am constantly having to make upheaval for some reason. For instance, my upper hall, which leads to the sleeping apartment, was rendered so unexpectedly dark by a little addition that after a number of people had missed their footing on the stairs, I decided that safety demanded something to be done. So over a year ago, I took out a wall and put in a skylight." End quote. This shows that another answer for the labyrinth came as a result of mistakes she made, and since she just had disposable income, she just put in a skylight and just kept on going. With her ambitious architectural ideas and choosing to have a quiet life, of course the locals started to gossip. By 1895, the house had gotten bigger in such a short amount of time that it, of course, drew curious eyes. On February 24th, 1895, an article ran in the San Francisco Chronicle that basically laid the foundation for the Winchester House legend. Quote, The sound of the hammer is never hushed. The reason for it is in Mrs. Winchester's belief that when the house is entirely finished, she will die. Whether she had discovered the secret of eternal youth and will live as long as the building material, saws, and hammers last, or is doomed to disappointed as great as Ponce de Leon in his search for the fountain of life, is question for time to solve. End quote. That article was so popular that it went to other newspapers all over the state. More rumors started and began to focus on Sally's mental health. But current and former workers, servants, and family members of Sally's never claimed that she was mad or superstitious. In a 1925 statement by Rob Lieb, son of Sally's lawyer Frank Lieb, he says, quote, Mrs. Winchester is a sane and clear-headed woman as I have ever known. She had a better grasp of business and financial affairs than most men. The commonly believed superstition that she had hallucinations is all bunk, end quote. I just love that word. It's all bunk. Whether you believe Sally was mad or did woo-woo Ouija boardy thingies, by the time Sally died, the 45-acre, 2-story, 8-room farmhouse had exploded into a behemoth labyrinth of 24,000 square feet, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, 3 elevators, and 1 shower. The renovation price tag was $5 million in 1923, or about $90 million today. Since the house was opened to the public on June 30th, 1923, more than 12 million people have visited. It takes 65 minutes to tour the entire house and 25 minutes to walk the gardens. You can go on tours where supposedly an old worker of Sally's named Clyde still roams the halls. People have reported being touched, hearing voices, doors opening and closing on their own. It has been in numerous lists of haunted mansions and attractions. Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures and other ghost hunter teams have visited the house and have found some evidence of hauntings. In 2018, the horror film Winchester, starring Helen Mirren as Sally, plays up to these mysteries. Is the Winchester house built by ghosts and the spirits have stayed to this day? Or was Sarah Winchester overly ambitious and made the most unique house in history? At the end of the day, that's up to you. Oh, Sarah Winchester, that one, this research, it wasn't that it was extensive. There were just so much to cover. And truly, at the end of the day, this is a mystery house that is left to you. I want to go see that house, though. If you learned something today, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're down there, please leave a friendly comment. Do you believe the Winchester house is haunted? Or was Sarah just an overly ambitious renovator? Let me know in the comments. I'll be back next week with another video. And until then, don't be well behaved. You just might make herstory. Have a safe Halloween, guys.